Hello, it is so good to see everybody back here, whether you attended our May Supporting Students with Disabilities in Virtual Environments one-day session, or maybe you attended August one-day session just a few weeks ago. We are so happy to have you. Just a few items of housekeeping as we get started today. You may notice that this Zoom layout looks different than maybe what a lot of us are used to. We have kind of disabled the open chat forum because this room could get pretty full with the number of participants today. There is a question and answer tool. So if you do have a question that you'd like to pose to one of the session moderators or for discussion from our special guests today, you could post that in the question and answer section. And if we have time and we're able to get to those, we will. Otherwise, maybe it will be something we add to our shared notes doc. So on the screen and soon in that chat box window, there will be a link to our shared notes doc where we have lots of resources, some just general information about this series that will be monthly webinars, and some other special opportunities and events with this initiative. Today's session has been updated slightly. We heard you, we saw your feedback, especially if you attended the August one-day session. And so we updated today's topic so that we could have more time to focus on progress monitoring. But that does not mean we won't cover family and parent engagement. We've got a lot of resources and expertise on that subject. We're just gonna save that for another webinar. That way we can give it the attention it deserves as well. So as we're getting settled and ready to go today, you'll see the shared notes doc link there. You can keep that, maybe bookmark it, save it so that you can come back to it with all of the resources and updates. You'll also notice that we do have closed captioning available on today's webinar. The webinar will be recorded and posted to our Schoology course, as well as an accessible version of the slides themselves that are being presented. So those resources will be updated and shared as soon as possible after today's session. And there are a few other things to note about our initiative. You'll see here that we've got lots of opportunities coming up. We're so very pleased to be able to connect with you about this very timely topic of supporting students with disabilities in virtual and hybrid environments. As we get started with the 2020-21 school year, we know that it looks way different than anyone could have imagined months ago, or definitely a year ago. So a few things that we know are coming up. You'll see our monthly webinars will be available starting today, and then our next one, I believe it's October 10th. It's in the shared notes. So you'll see the registration for October will soon open. It's not available yet, but you will get an email after today's webinar with information on how to register. But even before then, we are following up each monthly session with some extra support in the form of technical assistance office hours. So Tuesday will be our first session for that. If you have questions about maybe specific tools to use with students or classroom management with virtual environments, you can see us on Tuesday for that, or schedule an appointment with us for one-on-one support using that best practices email. So you might see us again on Tuesday if you want, and hopefully you'll see us on October 8th for the next monthly webinar. In the meantime, we definitely encourage you to join our Schoology course. That is kind of the one-stop shop for all things SSDVE. You'll find recordings and additional supports and resources for all of the SSDVE webinars and conferences and special sessions. We have some open discussion forums you can participate in. And we also use the announcement tool to post any timely updates or kind of FYI tidbits that we come across just day to day. So the access to the Schoology course is open to anyone. You can find out more about how to enroll in Schoology in our shared notes doc. With that being said, I would just feel so guilty about taking any more time away from today's topic and today's special guests. We are so thrilled to have with us two very, very special people. We have Dr. David Bateman and Dr. Sean J. Smith, who will be sharing their expertise and very just wonderful considerations given the timely topic of progress monitoring, the how, the why for virtual environments. Dr. Bateman and Dr. Smith, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, I'll go first. All right. And so what I'll do is I'll share my screen. And okay. And so I'm going to be talking about why to do progress monitoring. And as I start, I just want to sincerely appreciate all the teachers out there and all the administrators who, from my August recommendations, took it seriously and either sent flowers or bottles of wine to their school psychologists. I heard from multiple schools, multiple special ed directors who did take what I said about the need to make sure that we provide supports for school psychologists because they're going to be so overworked. So I just want to thank all the teachers and administrators who reached out to me talking about this. So please, I did mean that, things like this. And we're going to talk very briefly. We're kind of divvying this up. I'm going to be talking about more on why to do progress monitoring, the importance of this, and why this is so very important. Just to remind you, for those of you who don't know me, I was a hearing officer for many years. I now work with a lot of school districts, typically when not often positive things are happening. I haven't discussed a due process hearing or preparation for a due process hearing in over an hour now, so I'm on break. So this is good. But one of the things you all have to realize is that the reality of the situation is that we need data in order to make informed decisions. But I also need to realize that we're dealing with a new normal. So why don't I just highlight this for you, is that many of you went back to school just recently and have some sense of where we are with this. And this is the days that we had before this past summer, and it is understanding where we are. I live in Carlisle, and the only way I knew which days of the week it was is because I had to move my cars for street sweeping. And so until further notice, this is what's going on. But now I know which days of the week are. And it's a change, and my life has changed dramatically as a result of this. But for those of you who are back in school, I sincerely hope that things are moving and progressing for you nicely. I've been talking with school districts and representatives from school districts across the nation today. Our issues are very different. Some of our numbers are going down. I was talking to individuals in Illinois about how bad the numbers are, or about in California, how bad the wildfires are affecting things today. So I want to keep them in our thoughts as we talk about these things. But I just share with you, but I mean, this is what our life is like now. This is what our life is like. It's just a teacher standing in front of her classroom, asking them to stay 6 feet away. And I did have a nice presentation in a school district yesterday where all the administrators did keep their distance and keep their masks on. So thank you very much, Cumberland Valley School District. But I want to thank you for this, but to keep this in distance, all right? So more on progress monitoring. You've all heard me talk about the Andrew F. Supreme Court case and other venues. If not, please go back to the August workshops that we did and try to touch base with the information relating to that. As a part of that, we included an article that I've just recently authored on the Andrew F. Supreme Court case. But just to remind you, to address the impact of remote learning under Andrew F. and the Department of Education guidance, IEP teams should convene if a student is not making expected progress. You're going to hear that multiple times from me just in the next few minutes. And that changes the IEP may be warranted. As we return to in-person instruction, teams should convene if the student is not on track to meet IEP goals. I guarantee you will hear from that again in a few minutes. Revisions related to goals, services, placement, or methodology may be considered to ensure the student is receiving FAPE. Parents also may request IEPs, but you have to remind you of this, is the standard for where we are has risen. Standard has risen, so keep this in mind. But the only way to document this, and when I go into school districts and review as we're thinking about whether a due process hearing is necessary, I just ask for the data. Give me the data, and provide me the data for what we have as a part of this, right? But more. There's been issues relating to progress, and what we're asking typically is for school districts to look at where the child was when we were dealing with him or her in March, and what kind of progress the student was making then. Some of the kids have had access to computers, some have had not. Some have had spotty Wi-Fi like I had the other night, which just frustrated me immensely. Some students have had problems with participation, and so they've been there, they've not been there. That also goes with consistency. And some of the parents have been a little spotty about what we've been asking for them as far as this. We've also been looking at whether there's been serious issues relating to regression. And this is posing a significant problem because how are we actually measuring this? You just have to remind yourselves that we need data in order to make informed decisions, because without data, we can't make a decision about what's going on with the child and where we are with this. So please keep good data about where we are with this. But just also hit on this, and I'm going to skim through this. Copies will be made available for you, so they'll be there as this is being recorded. Okay? If a student is not making expected progress, changes to the IEP may be warranted. And so I've shown you this before, but I really do emphasize this enough that all IEP teams should convene to see if the students are on track to meet IEP goals. This is every single IEP team, not just the ones you think are suspect, not the other ones. You really need to make sure that all IEPs are there. So as I was talking to the administrators in the school district yesterday, I'm reminded of this, to make sure that we address every single IEP out there, and we pay attention to this. But we also, it could be goals, related, whatever it is, we need to do this. So when we talk about this, I can't emphasize this enough, because without data, you have no idea whether or not a child is making progress. And I'm going to show you some evidence of some bad data that I have in a minute. But it's interesting about this is it poses a problem, because some of you are not often getting all the data that you need in order to make the decisions necessary. I mean, some of you are looking at things like this, and this is a t-shirt that I saw that kind of summarizes this, right? There are two types of people in this world. One, those that extrapolate from incomplete data. Well, that's who you are now. You're having to extrapolate from incomplete data. So with the data that you are able to access, what you need to do is make sure that you regularly meet with your school psychologist, again, who I think are wonderful people, but also meet with them on a regular basis to help determine precisely what's going on, precisely what we can do as a part of this and what we need to be, so we can actually ascertain where we are with the kids and what additional services are. I will lay more of the foundation. Dr. Smith will do probably a great job talking about where the resources are. So I'm gonna reserve a little of that for him, but more on foundation. I mean, really, why are we doing this? Okay. I was involved in many due process hearings last year. And if we didn't have data, we settled. And we just immediately settled because it's not defensible. I'm not going to recommend that you put a teacher on the witness stand who doesn't have good data. It just doesn't make sense, because you're going to be grilled, as you should be, about the progress that kids are making. So what I'm advocating is regular data reflections that can help us understand precisely where the child is functioning, what's going on with the child, so we can make an informed decision about where we are, so we can make informed decisions about what's going on. So it's not just for litigation that I'm dealing with this. It's better for the child. And I really want to emphasize this, and I cannot emphasize this enough. It's better for the child for us to understand precisely what's going on. And by doing this, we have an important one, it's an important variable of this that we need to determine: how is a child functioning, right? So what I have been doing, and what I'm about to show you is a screen. The next two screens are collections of progress monitoring data that I have collected just in the past 2 years. This is all prior to COVID that I have as a part of this. Prior to COVID, these are on reading goals. And this is the progress monitoring data that was provided to the parents. So this is what the district may have had more progress monitoring data, but if you have data, share it. Don't just keep it there. But this is progress monitoring data that was shared with the parents on the kids' reading goals. These are all reading goals. So these are individual things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These individual 7 steps here, you see this? I'm sorry, 8. What you see here, you see are 8 individual kids. So, and this is all from I'd say 4 different districts in Pennsylvania. But this is progress the kid made on their reading goal was good. Like, that sounds great, I'm happy, things like this. Second one, another kid on his progress reading goal on reading, seems happy. Another one making progress or needs help, tries hard, getting better, needs assistance, still needs support. Well, the last one actually indicates that the child may need additional services for special education and related services. That's the important one. But what I want to look at here is, yes, this is data this is the information that is being provided to the parents, but the parents can't make informed decisions about what's going on with the child on these individual reading goals. So what we're talking about is we need to make sure that the data that we're providing to the parents accurately reflects what's going on with the child so that they can also make an informed decision about the supports that are being provided to their child. A kid seeming happy about a reading goal does not help the kid, nor does it help the parent understand what's going on. So keep that in mind. The next one, at least we've got some numbers. The first child, and this one, I know the first one is just the parent, all they received was the child was at 75%. We're not sure exactly 75% how this was measured, but we're at 75%. The second one is 3 out of 4, which seems a lot like 75% to me, but it's basically, that's what was reported. This is my personal favorite by far of all of these, is on a reading goal. This was what was provided to the parent. This is all that was provided to the parent on most days. I really don't know what that means. And I never, we settled it, so I never got a chance to query the teacher about what this was meant, but we did some professional development that hopefully changes what's going on. And for those of you who have drop-down menus as part of, like, for instance, a part of your IEP writing program, where you have a drop-down menu that can help determine, some parents got a 3. Parents had no context to what a 3 was. But is it 3 out of 10? Is it 3 out of 3? Is 3 a good thing? Is 3 a bad thing? Same thing with 4, same thing with 1. Is my child number 1 in the class, or is my child functioning on a scale of 1 to 10 on 1? Where is this? The same thing with A, C, or D. The parents didn't have any understanding of where they were with this, so it really did pose a problem about how they were doing. The last one is I'm pleased. I am sincerely pleased that the child was making good efforts. That is good. I'm happy that that's happening, that we want kids to make good efforts, but that doesn't give me any indication yet one way or the other about how the child is doing on his or her reading goal. So keep this in mind, all right? So just a little bit more here, all right, on things like this. Why do progress monitoring? Hey, this pays attention to this. I've highlighted some words here that should stand out for you. If the IEP team fails to develop or implement progress monitoring plans, their responsibilities, the recent decisions have revealed 5 primary areas of concern. I'm sorry, but the team has failed to develop a progress monitoring plan. You need to make sure that you have this, and you need to make sure that you have it on a regular basis. I was working with a district where they were taking progress monitoring data on a child only once per marking period. If that child happened to miss that day, or was pulled out, or the bus was late, or something like that, there was no progress monitoring data from that child. Regular, frequent progress monitoring, okay? Or the responsibilities for progress monitoring are inappropriately delegated. We're assigning that to not the teacher who's responsible for working with the kid. We're having others do these things. Or do not have developed plans that monitor behavior intervention plans. I mean, the Ender F Supreme Court case was, in effect, a kid with a behavior problem. He had significant behavior problems. So we have to think about progress monitoring, not just for reading and spelling and math. We also have to think about it for behaviors. And that's all too often forgotten as a part of this. And we need to include this as a part of where we are with this, okay? Wait, there's more. Or using inappropriate measures to determine students' progress towards graduation. And so we saw that. You saw that in the examples that I just gave you about why we need to do this. But inappropriate measures is a part of this. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. Make sure that you actually are measuring what's going on. Don't use, for instance, the reading part of the, like for word problems from the Key Math Diagnostic Arithmetic test to determine whether a child is having problems in reading. That's a math test. So use appropriate measures on this. And yes, a district did do that, right? Or as you heard me say this just a minute ago, that progress monitoring is not frequent enough to meet the requirements of IDA or provide meaningful data to IEP teams. Got to remember, we're doing this as a way of trying to check with what's going on. So these are important things that I have seen just in the past year and a half of what we need to think about as our part of this. So that is the why. The how, let's talk about the how of progress monitoring, and emphasize this and emphasize these important parts. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics of this, but just how to think about this as part of the big picture, okay? How about this, okay? How will the child's progress be measured? You need to ask these basic questions about this and make sure that the IEB team is addressing these things. So that how will the progress be measured? So whenever you write a goal, ask yourselves, how will this goal be evaluated? And how will this goal be measured, and how we're going to do this? So keep that in mind. Then, when will the child's progress be measured? When will the child's progress be measured as a part of this? So So just, is it something we can do? Is it something we can, when will this be done? Or it'll be multiple times a week, multiple times this? How is this going to go for the child? Take and see what we can do about this. And but what are we going to do about this as a part of this? And that's what we need to pay attention to. Then, how well will the child need to perform in order to achieve his or her stated IEP goals? And for some children, the benchmarks and objectives. So do we have a certain criteria that we want the students to get to? And we should, as a part of our IEP goals, have a certain criteria that we want to get there as a part of this, okay? But we must provide progress monitoring reports on the same schedule that parents receive from non-disabled kids, receive the report cards as a part of this, so we can see where we are with this. And so it's something we need to think about this, but we need to make sure that parents are getting reports about where the child is functioning. It's an important part of where we are. It's an important part of what we're doing. And it's an important part, it's an important variable. So keep that in mind about this, okay? Wait, more, okay? How? Conduct frequently and it's conducted frequently and provides easy and quick methods for this. Assessment drives instruction. Assessment drives instruction. So we need to keep this in mind as we go with this. But also, since that assessment drives instruction, the analysis of students' progress in order to modify instructional programs when needed, we need to do this. But we also need this as a comparison. Grades are so vitally important to some individuals. And so it's not just grades, but the students' progress on their goals and objectives. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. But this is part, so keep asking these questions as we go to this. So what I want to do now is to just lay the foundation for the steps for virtual progress monitoring and some tips that we have as a part of this. So things we need to pay attention to as we address these things. And keep this in mind and just kind of allude to this. Dr. Smith will further clarify some of these things and kind of go into this as we address this. But some basic tips for virtual progress monitoring that we need to think about as a part of this. Step number one, can the assessment be delivered remotely? What you need to think about, for instance, those of you who are those of you working kindergarten through 7th grade and use AIMSweb, Pearson has good guidance related to AIMSweb. So if you're looking for guidance related to AIMSweb, it can be delivered virtually. You need to think about this and think about the resources there. For those of you who use Dibbles, the University of Oregon is offering, you have to log in, but is offering free access during COVID as a part of this. So you have to think about using some of these things. Some of these things are really good, some not as good. So you have to pay very close attention to this. Second step, administer these kinds of things. But you have to think about as part of your administration, what can we do as a part of this? Can this actually reflect where the child is functioning? And does it really determine and help where we are with this? And so is it really going to be something we can do as a part of this? And keep that in mind, all right? But administer this. Whatever data you get, and I can't emphasize this enough, whatever data you get, make sure, make sure that the data is shared with the team. Do not be just the person about this who keeps the data to yourself. Share data with the team. One of the things I'm watching is I'm participating in a number of Zoom meetings where data is being shared. Make sure it's shared. But also share data with the parents and make sure it's better than what I shared with you earlier. Make sure you share this data with the parents and then make sure you have some sense of this, okay? But make sure that you have this. But then think about how will this data guide instruction? How is this data going to guide instruction and pay attention to this? But what's interesting about this, I want to make sure that you think about this, is if you're using norm reference tests, things you have to think about is use caution in using norms since the tests were not typically standardized for remote administration. So since they're not standardized for remote administration, you need to pay very close attention to, are we going to use this for norming data or are we just using it for informed instruction? Use it to guide instruction. Don't so much pay attention to placement. Use it for guiding instruction and pay attention to this. So next, computer and internet, right? Do an equipment check on this. I teach a class at Shippensburg at night. My internet was down. My class started at 6:30. My internet was down until 6:25 the other night, which posed significant problems. Yes, I was running around frantically trying to figure out what's going on. And then I immediately emailed the students all these things that they needed to read and watch before the 6:30 class. But check this. Plan for poor connectivity as a part of internet. Just keep that in mind. But also prepare teacher materials and ensure a student has access to any required materials as a part of this. Make sure that you prepare this out there and things like this, right? Then, is there any other information out there? And this is what you need to keep in mind, and keep, again, the school psychologist as a part of this. If there are any concerns about the accuracy of the data, consider using additional data sources to assist in decision-making about a student's progress in the intervention. These data sources may include performance on classroom assessments, other progress monitoring measures, feedback from parents or the student, or a review of previous performance data. Look at all these things. Can the student compare to norms? Well, I've already talked about this. Scores from progress monitoring assessments can help inform distance-based learning, but if using scores from assessments administered outside the school for high-stakes decision-making, be sure to interpret scores with caution and, when possible, gather data from additional resources. So keep that in mind. But then number 10, ensure parents understand why you're collecting progress monitoring data, and the assessment will help inform decisions about instruction. Explain to the parents the importance of not providing additional support to the student while taking the progress monitoring assessments. I explained that when they provide support or change the environment, they may impact the data and make it difficult to understand and interpret the data. And encourage parents to try to create a consistent environment for when the student takes the assessment. And keep that in mind as we talk about this, okay? Plan regular intervals. Plan regular intervals for providing this instruction. Plan regular intervals for when you're doing this. Check the data on a regular basis, and then make sure that you're checking this on a regular basis. Can you actually obtain the answers that you need to do about providing the instruction from the progress monitoring data for these kids? And then work with the parents to schedule. Make sure you use the data that you have for instruction. Make sure you have that as a part of this, okay? So make sure, and talk about this, and make sure that you use this, and that you continue to see, are there other areas where the child needs to be assessed? Are there other forms? Are there other forms where we need to think about this, and where we need to pay attention to this, and what we need to think about as we address this? And is the child showing regression? Is this helping the child meet their IEP goals, or are there other changes necessary? I whipped through this last section rather quickly, but I can't emphasize enough is that you don't just take data for data's sake, that you're actually using this to make informed decisions about where the child is functioning. And if you do this, it'll be better for the child and be better for everyone. So I can't emphasize this enough. I have here an example of the school district's monitoring data collection. Use this to keep track of where the child is, or they were on what goal number they're talking about, their progress monitoring data for the previous year, whether progress monitoring after the first couple of weeks of data instruction, are you showing regression, progress monitoring data from future times. Use this and make sure that what you're doing is helping the kids make a determination about yay or nay about how they're doing and where they're making progress. It's a vital and important part of this process. And last, and I know Dr. Smith is going to talk about this, is the National Center on Intensive Intervention, it's put out by the American Institutes of Research, has great information about academic progress monitoring tools charts. One thing that I really do strongly encourage those is to pay attention to is those who work in secondary programs, because they have data as how to access this and how to pay attention to this. It has great resources, and I really do want to emphasize this. Right? Pay attention to this and go to the National Center on Intensive Intervention. But I just want to remind you that when the expectations seem to feel impossible, remember that because of today, someone smiled, learned something new, became more confident, and felt love. Do not give up. For those of you who heard me earlier in August, one of the things I could not emphasize enough, and I want to continue to emphasize for you, is to keep trying, Please, please, please keep trying. These kids deserve an education. These kids are leading a life, first having a disability that they did not, at no fault of their own, but they're also having to deal with COVID, and they're having to deal with other issues, again, at no fault of their own. These kids deserve an education. So the best absolute thing that you guys can do is first continue to attend these sessions on a monthly basis. The next one is October 8th. The second thing is make sure that you let us know the topics that you feel that are important for us. That we have a wonderful support team that can help as part of this. Attend the office hours that are part of this, but also forward questions as you have to me. I provided you my Shippensburg email address here for you. I also am posting things on the Twitter and the Facebook that you can access things there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith, and so that he can start clarifying more about where we are with this, and so that he can and give you more information and guidance on this. So please go to there and please stay attention and pay attention to where we are with this. Okay, Dr. Smith, your turn.
All right. Well, thank you, David. It's always a hard act to follow, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see me when I share my screen. But before I share my screen, I'm wearing a suit coat, not wearing a tie, but I'm ready for you folks. In terms of, oh wait, let's see. So I don't want to share that. I want to present that. Okay. So I hope everyone can see my screen. And David, I know I can still see you. Want to give me a thumbs up? Can you share this? Can you see that? All right, great, great, great. All right. So I'm really excited, folks, to be here. And for those of us that were with each other in August, good to see you back. For those of us who are not, I am going to give you some resources that we talked about in August. But because of the limited time today, and I want to set my timer here, I want to kind of, in a way, you know, I was going to say David was a bit of the stormy clouds, but yet he finished really strongly. But with that idea, I was going to share the fact that, you know, what I want to emphasize today is a bit of the silver lining. And I do want to focus in on progress monitoring. I do have a limited time. And so what I thought I would do is cover some broad things, realizing we're all looking at different students. We're all looking with different districts. And of course, we have a variety of different needs and technology tools and all that. But I thought I'd give you some examples that illustrate some things very concretely as well. And of course, give you some resources to go along with it. And so this is already available off of the website that we shared that Sarah and others shared via Patton. But with that, there's a link directly to what I'll be sharing today. And I share this link with you, and I saw some of you are already on this. And the reason I share it is because many of the links are embedded within the actual presentation. It's a Google slide presentation. It's on the doc for today. In addition, it's been coupled together with the presentation for David. Another resource I want to go to before we get too far, and it's something that I've shared. Oops, I need to go back here. It's always a little tricky when I'm on Zoom. So, all right. So is also, I want to go over to the school virtually. This is something I have as a bottom feeder for most of the site, but I want to emphasize this, and this is the school virtually site, because I want to make sure everyone's aware, while there's a lot of different resources out there, some great resources created, this is one I want to just make you aware of on a couple different fronts. First of all, if you're thinking of doing assessment overall and ideas for assessment, we have a number of different here for digital tools for, where is it? Digital tools for action expression. So for our assessment right here, okay? And then also a link here about progress monitoring, implemented for the IEP and distance learning. Just some general overviews, as well as some thoughts there, and a number of other things to consider here off of School Virtual. But that's more of a resource for you when you get a chance. All right, so let's get started. So I say the silver lining. And what I mean by the silver lining is the fact that many of the things David's talking about that we're required to do in this new COVID, lots of challenges. And yet there are a number of digital solutions that can do many of the things that David's asking us to do. And honestly, to me, the silver lining is when we're beyond COVID, and we will be beyond COVID, when we're beyond COVID, I would argue these are some of these digital tools that we're going to continue to be using day in and day out because they began to make our life easier. They're getting the data that we really need, and potentially they're getting data beyond what David's talking about with some of those limitations. But I do know it's going to take some time. I do know it's taking a lot of time. I do know it's taking a lot of effort. And of course, sometimes all that effort doesn't equal the time. And I realize that, and I appreciate that. I just want to recognize that as we get started. Now, as David mentioned, he mentioned a number of different things. He really did. And I actually had to step out for just a moment. I have a couple kids doing homeschooling or school remote learning, school at distance, online learning, however you want to mention it. And they had a problem solving. So I had to step out. I'm not sure if David offered this visual. I know it was in an earlier part of his PowerPoint, but I missed it. But if he didn't do it, I love it. And I just think it's awesome. So thank you, David, for sharing that. And thank you so much for that guidance. Okay, so let's digitize it, folks. Let's think about what David talked about. and let's digitize it in respect to the progress monitoring. And in addition to this idea of taking this progress monitoring idea and assessment overall for students with disabilities and digitizing it, I am going to reinforce something that I'm not going to have enough time to spend at all on, but I think it's so critical. When we think of assessment, we have to think of, to me, two different things. One, I'll reinforce more so than the other. I have this little visual up here. Oops, I have this little visual up here. And this is a visual that will take you to, and I don't know why I'm having troubles here, I apologize. This little visual is hyperlinked. I'm having more problems, so I won't try to go to it, to the Universal Design for Learning framework. It's a critical framework, and to me, I mention it because when we're thinking about assessing in a digital, hybrid, fully online, even face-to-face where it has to be digital because of the limited time, practice, things of that nature, that framework is critical to really rethink our assessment, all right? And digital tools can help facilitate it. And then the other image there is the image I had in the entry point, and I want to reinforce that, is how we can see and access data, but I'll get to that here in just a moment. All right, so David mentioned this right at the ending, and I'm going to go to it here right at the beginning, and that is there's a phenomenal tool by the National Center on Intensive Interventions. This is linkable off of the PowerPoint, excuse me, the Google Slides, and when you go to it, the big thing here is what it's doing is, first of all, it gives you a tremendous amount of assessments related to either reading, I selected reading there, or mathematics, or spelling and written expression. I'll get to a writing one here in just a second. I can do pre-K, I can do all the way to high school, and it's gonna filter it. And in filtering it, it's gonna then give you a bit of a consumer reports from an assessment perspective, everything on reliability to validity, but also in terms of usability, as well as growth standards. Almost all these are online. And so many of them are going to give you a lot of different features that are critical in this hybrid fully online experience, not only as tools that do great progress monitoring, but they're also web-based. And so they could be done from afar. Yes, almost all of these cost money. And so that becomes a challenge within our district. But I want you to know those tools are there. They've been there prior to COVID, becoming more and more important with progress monitoring during COVID. But another element we can't forget about, and I gotta reinforce this, and this is something I reinforced in August for those folks that are with us again. The content management systems we work with and the learning management systems we work with, and I don't know which ones you're working with. Some of you may be Google Classroom. I'm surrounded by Google Classroom out here, and if it's not Google Classroom, it's Seesaw. Actually, there's a good number of folks that are PowerSchool and also Schoology. Well, you know what? Some folks are using Blackboard. The list goes on. Canvas, actually, that's a popular one as well. Now, our content management systems, remember, are ones that are not shells, but they're actually the systems that are providing the curriculum. Khan Academy is one that many of us know, but there's also a number of others, K-12 Incorporated. And I want to emphasize and remind us, I can't say this enough, many of these already have tools where they not only offer the questions, they offer the formats, and more importantly to me, they offer the dashboard system to be able to do what David was mentioning, and that is make comparison against the individual across time, make comparison across other students, make comparison across norms. And those are things that are critical for our progress monitoring when it comes to our IEP. Now, most of us, in my experience, do not have access to these fully blown, all independent, all created for us types of systems. Those are expensive. So most of us are in these learning management systems. And I want to illustrate one with Google Classroom in just a moment. But as I get there, I want to emphasize these are phenomenal from normal, what we would do face-to-face, paper, pencil, because first of all, the assessments we create can be more universally designed. They can allow for a lot of variability in our learners, but they also allow for us a lot of options as instructors to facilitate how we want to structure things, but also how we want students to be able to provide back to information. So it's giving us flexibility as well. But at the end of the day, as David was mentioning, we really want to focus in on this. We want that data to make comparison, of course, trend lines, aim lines. We want comparison across students, a host of things. Now, this is right out of Google Forms. We can get data elements, and of course, this is just something I grabbed off of images, but we can get data on almost anything, well, anything that we're collecting based on questions or series of questions will go into a dashboard system. Well, that's really, really important for us to be able to make some observations David's asking for us to do. So that's where I'm going to go for just a minute. And I want to emphasize, this is just one of many, many examples. If you walk away here thinking, Sean just talked about Google Forms and that was a waste of my time, you're missing the point. So let me emphasize, I want to illustrate it through Google Forms. Well, we could illustrate this through Quizlet. We could illustrate this through Nearpod. We could illustrate this through News2You. We could illustrate this through Unique Learning Systems. There's a host of other learning management systems or even digital tools out there that allow us to do these types of features and allow us to do it in a manner that gives us this type of data dashboards. I illustrate Google Forms and Google Classrooms because it's widely used K through 12, it's free, and it offers a number of these ideas that just bring it all together. So let's emphasize this. And many of you are like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I use Google Forms. Well, good. Let's connect some dots so beyond just potentially how I see a lot of teachers using it. It is a one-stop. Think of this. I've got my sheets, I've got my forms, I've got my Google Slides, I've got my docs. The list goes on in the Google family that I can all interact with and utilize. I mean, it's wonderful that YouTube is part of the family because I can use video in so many different ways from an assessment purposes that is very, very creative. The usability format, it's accessible. It's accessible in so many different ways. And of course, once they've signed in, even though they don't need to sign in, but if they've signed into the Google Classroom, then our tracking on them is automatic. It's immediate. It offers lots of different things. Now, this fourth grade teacher, I have followed her on several different things. There's several teachers out there that have given lots of different things. She has a certain amount of energy to her. I like her little green things in the back. She has nice, anyways, she offers a nice overview of creating a Google form for a quiz. And so it's very thorough. It's about 4 minutes long. Watch that at your leisure. And I'll try to provide other links as we go along. But you know, there's more. There's more. And that is, do you guys remember this commercial? Anyways, never mind. So when we think about our quizzes, we can organize things, first of all, by a question. We can, in Google Classroom, we can put in a question anywhere we want. Hey, we can do an exit ticket real quick. A question just sits by itself. But we can also organize any question or the quizzes we provide for the whole class, small group, individual, again, with the child signing in, bingo. And for those of you that are working with kids with more significant disabilities and you're thinking, no, this is going to be too confusing. I've got a young son, well, he's a young man now with Down syndrome. He's been using Google Classroom since upper elementary. Let's see, I think, yeah, upper elementary, middle school. He is an individual with an intellectual disability. He has an IQ below 70. He has adaptive skill limitations. He has communication issues. Google Classroom has been his friend for years, and he's been able to use it. It has been created for him, but he's been able to use it very easily. Okay, so lots of different options there, right? Now, the other thing in Google Forms, but also in many other tools, is not only can I put in text, but I also can put in images. I can put in video. The list that goes on that I can put in terms of elements within that quiz. And again, there's a Universal Design for Learning framework. There's a link there, as you can see from my finger. It's turned into a finger from a pointer that will take you over to the framework to get you a better understanding of why these options are so critical for our individuals. And by the way, I had the teacher student there with arrows going back both ways, because from the teacher perspective, I can design this in a very interactive manner. And from the student perspective, I can upload images. I can provide a link. I can provide answers if the teachers organize the question this way, where I'm uploading information. I could do things with drawings and scan them and take a picture of them and put them up online. There's a lot of flexibility with these types of assessments that honestly, I think traditional face-to-face is somewhat reserved in their possibility. Now, another thing that I don't think we use enough, and that is you can customize every single form and actually sheet and doc and of course slideshow with these themes. You can create a theme. It could be your classroom theme. It could be directions that you want to visualize, that you want to be able to then make sure that they're making the connections. It could be prompts that you want to put into as a theme for the Google form, for the slide you're using, excuse me, for the page you're using. It could contextualize the quiz. It goes on and on and on. Themes were not created for special education teachers to help students with disabilities understand the quiz format for progress monitoring. And yet it's there and it's very creative, very easy to use, and a lot of fun. Oh, by the way, the video I shared shows this, okay? So now we can combine forms with sheets, interacting with the Google Classroom. I mentioned that already. But we can also organize it, as many of us know. And again, I can do this in Seesaw. I can do this in Canvas. I can do this in other learning management systems. And that is the automaticity. I can set it up where the child gets automatic feedback on what they've done. And that automatic feedback is going to offer reinforcement. And that automatic feedback could be something I put in before. It could be automatic feedback, which I put in for this was the answer and this is why. So it could be a learning tool. everything in between. It could be delayed feedback, where something I'm going to now take a look at and then give you feedback. But the feedback I could give would be that automatic. In terms of what I'm doing is when I post it, it could go to everybody. I'm sorry, I'm using automatic a couple different ways. And I'm just realizing I think someone is signing at the same time, and I greatly appreciate that, or typing, and I apologize for my speed. 20 minutes is very quick. But the other element here in terms of images, audio, et cetera, remember, I can also put in audio narrative, not only for a question, but for direction. I could put in video for an illustration or a question. Of course, they could provide video to give me feedback as well. I can shuffle the questions so we can use potentially the same assessment in a variety of different ways at a variety of different times. I can demonstrate, okay, the students can demonstrate what they know, first of all, with all the different formats we're mentioning. And I mentioned earlier, they can upload so many different things as resources, etc., to be able to demonstrate what they know. But again, and from our format, we can then we can measure it, and it goes into the dashboard system for that progress monitoring. So think of that. I'm giving you flexibility to upload and share what you know. I've organized it in a scoring mechanism, and then it automatically goes into the dashboard system we mentioned earlier, and allows me as an instructor to make those connections across the student, across time, and of course across the classroom or across a variety of different individuals. So that variability is flexible. And then again, grading, as I already mentioned, I can automatically preset it. So therefore, as soon as the child finishes, they get their grade, they know what was right, they know what was wrong. I could put in there automatic reinforcements, great job, audio, video, text. I could also put in redirection about what that answer meant, what that answer was, why it was that way. So there's a learning opportunity right there. The students see their points. And by the way, we're not talking about engagement, high level of engagement, giving this automatic feedback to students, very, very critical. And again, Google's not the only one. A number of systems allow for me to do this. Now, on the other tools we mentioned verbally, I'll have here, and they're hyperlinked if you get to the presentation. Nearpod has a whole suite and system of this. Seesaw for a lot of our primary students. A lot of teachers are using Seesaw. Quizlet offers a lot of this. Quizlet's pretty powerful, by the way. Cahoots, many of us have used Cahoots. I love Cahoots because I can steal. You know, some of the best teachers are the best thieves. I can steal from test questions and others that others have created, modify, make them in my own, and then bring them into my own Cahoots, et cetera, et cetera. I've never pronounced accurately out loud, but it's a whole other system, and I've hyperlinked that as well. And again, many of these systems do what I just offered with Google Forms. A little different though, unlike Seesaw, which is a learning management system, these others would be kind of having to be incorporated into maybe the learning management system I'm using. But they offer dashboards, they offer that type of data that I'm looking for, and maybe not as rich as some, but definitely offering that. Now, if you were with me last time, I offered an illustration on progress monitoring. I'm not going to offer that illustration again, but I am going to offer a hyperlink. And this is a hyperlink to reinforce very specific ways to do progress monitoring in writing. It is a tool that those have already seen it. You may have reached out to us. If not, feel free to reach out to me. We're already setting up a number of people in Pennsylvania from August to utilize this. It's free. There's just an extra step for us to set it up. But I'm emphasizing it here because it illustrates elements of how to monitor progress for writing. And it illustrates a way of doing it. You may not necessarily use this tool, but we've talked about various things for progress monitoring. I want to emphasize we can do this for writing, capturing student writing from afar. I actually think that's a positive in respect to the fact that it's hard to grade writing. It's hard to do it regularly. It's hard to do it so we actually stop poor habits. And yet more and more there's technology solutions to do it. And this is one that I want to emphasize, and that was the progress monitoring link. And of course you can get to the actual link for the program linking this image, but then you just need to email me and I'll put you in directions about how to go to the next step. Oh, and by the way, I want to emphasize this enough with the progress monitoring and the data that we're going to collect and that we're going to have automatically via some of these systems that we have. This data is awesome to be able to engage students. And so students love to be able to have that data walk. They love to have that connection. So we may not be able to do it as regularly as we'd like, but if students see their own data, students see how it's graphed, if we can spend some time either empowering the family member at home to connect this with their child and us to do it. Very powerful levels of engagement, levels for learning, setting their own goals, aligning with the goals we already have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there's lots of different writing supports to think of that we could go along. I am running out of time. I want to make a few last points, okay? I have a number of slides. Half the slides I haven't even covered. A number of these are from August with additional resources, some in addition. So I want to mention a few in addition, okay? So the first thing I want to mention here is back to the video. Now, I've mentioned video prior to in August. Some of you are asking questions during David's conversation about what about social skills? What about social interaction? How do we collect data on that? Well, this is where as instructors, we could organize things where we're asking them to collect certain type of video. Please videotape your child doing the following. We could even give them some guidelines of what we want them to illustrate. And then they capture that and they put that into a safe spot where we can access it. And we work with our IT department in our schools where the teachers, the parents can put this in a safe spot, or the adults at home can put it in a safe spot. We then can observe it and we can score from that. I think David would tell us that that's okay in terms of the data, the video we have, we can score as maybe not necessarily the element for the IP, but in collaboration with other elements we'll be collecting. Video, there's some hyperlinks to video. Okay, I'm running out of time. My timer's gonna go off, so I'm gonna talk for just another second or two. And that is there's a number of videos to be able to link. Here's a few, I've hyperlinked these. But another thing I've connected to, don't have the time, but you can connect that on your own. I have several pages on a Google Doc that list all sorts of different video technologies you can use both for capturing as well as editing. And those are some things as instructors we need to do to empower parents. And this was a note for myself to empower the parent. Now, I'm not necessarily saying parent helps us collect data, although I personally like it, but David might have an issue with that, and some districts may have an issue with that. So instead, it's empowering the parent. It's telling the parent, hey parent, would you be willing to set up this information? Would you be willing to, as David was mentioning, model this with the child so that we can then collect it later on? Would you make certain that the distraction free? Would you make sure it's a quiet environment? The list of things go on that we could ask the parent to empower for then the child to potentially do what we're asking them to do for that progress monitoring purposes. But they could also video. They can videotape different situations. We have that information and then we could observe and make determinations from there. There's a lot of other creative things to do. Some of the things we've written about on School Virtually, other things I've offered in terms of links of resources. And I'm going to simply scroll all the way down, Headache City here, in terms of the email address. Feel free to email me if you have questions. From August, several people did. I hope those answers helped. And I'm going to stop sharing and bring it back over to Sarah.
Wow, it's crazy how fast an hour goes. And we are so appreciative of your time, Dr. Smith, and yours as well, Dr. Bateman. In the few minutes that we have left, there are a few things that we'd like to, there's some questions that maybe popped up that we'd like to give a quick response to. Others we will post more details about in our shared notes doc. So I'm gonna pop up a slide real quick and offer a few kind of things to consider looking ahead and wrapping up. Maybe. I'm not as speedy as Dr. Smith is. He's so quick. Too many tabs open. Here we go. Okay, so there, I know there's going to be questions about attendance as we wrap up. The attendance form will become live in just a few moments. Attendance is required in order to get Act 48 or a certificate of attendance if you need it. We mentioned this already, but we do have a session for open hours of technical assistance coming up on this Tuesday. So if you have questions about any of the many things that Dr. Smith mentioned, ways that maybe you could use something like a Google form for progress monitoring, or if you've never really gotten super comfortable with screencasting or sharing videos, those are things that our team can talk through with you and offer some one-on-one support. And it's also important that we note that, and I would give Dr. Smith credit over anyone, that there is no one absolute perfect tool. And I believe he would shake his head in agreement to that. So there are, with anything, there are going to be limitations, but you know, our team's job is to help you consider those. So we don't have a magic wand, there's no magic potion. So the accessibility or the security features or any of those questions or concerns that you might have, we're happy to help kind of talk through with you so that you can make an informed decision for your use. But we may have some recommendations like Sean mentioned, but we can't make any promises that there's going to be a one size fits all, because that's the point, right? When we're talking about supporting students with disabilities, there is no one size fits all for everyone. So we hope that maybe some of you will take us up on that offer, and we'll see you Tuesday. Or if you'd like one-on-one support at a different time, if that time doesn't work for you, you can email us at our Best Practices Online email address, and we'll set up a Zoom or a call to meet with you individually. There are a few other resources that I'd like to point out. These are in the shared notes doc, but they are pertinent. If you haven't seen from PDE, PDE has been posting a collection of it's like a news drop roundup. So I'm gonna flip over there. Did my screen flip over, everybody? Give me a head nod, or Ethan, we're good? So this is linked in, thank you. This is linked in our shared notes doc, but for all things COVID-19 school year 2021, PDE has been collating all of their PR releases, all of their guidance documents, all of those resources in a weekly kind of list format. So I would definitely recommend cruising through there, because there are some really helpful resources, but also some FAQ docs and some updated materials that are very timely. So that is one page that I just want to make sure that we point out directly. Also linked in our shared notes doc, if you haven't really dug into the patent website, obviously we're grateful for all of our colleagues and the other consultants across initiatives in the patent network. The patent website is a treasure trove of not only resources that are tangible, but like we've mentioned, actual support. So if there is a specific need, maybe it's speech and language, or maybe you are working on something concerning specifically math, we would be more than happy to introduce you to some of our colleagues so that you can speak with them and get some one-on-one advice, and also dig into their resources as well. So as we're wrapping up, I'll switch back to the other slide. Don't forget to submit your attendance, pretty please. There's also a question in there where you can give us any feedback about a potential topic for next month. We have a lot of ideas juggling around in our head, but we really appreciate your input as well. And then if you haven't done so, we again encourage you to join our Schoology course. The recording of this session will be made there and linked in the shared notes doc, as well as the actual slideshow, including Dr. Smith's slides with all of the interactive and hyperlinked items that he shared today. Additionally, other resources that are relevant to the topic at hand, or some of the questions that we weren't able to address right now, we will also be posting those in the shared notes doc and also in Schoology. So we hope to see you asynchronously in Schoology, and we hope to see you live again in October for next month's session. Once you've taken note of today's attendance link, we invite you to leave us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much for attending today.